Hi guys, it is me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the weekend preview for the second Grand Prix of the season, the 2024 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Good to start the year with a back-to-back, and hopefully a better race this week than what we had in Bahrain. And I really hope that what we saw in Bahrain is not an omen for the season to come, not just in terms of competitiveness, but really just the entertainment of the races, because that was on last Saturday. That was the worst Bahrain Grand Prix by far we've ever had. I can't think of one that was that bad on that layout. I know people will say 2010, where we raced on that really weird alternate layout, but again, it was the layout, I think, that really made that such a bad race. Yeah, it was just not really, after the first pit stop, this wasn't really a competitive Grand Prix. There are a couple reasons for that, which we will get into in this stream. Talking about Ferrari and how they had some issues with their car, also Mercedes and how they had some issues with their car, reliability-wise, that meant they couldn't quite show as much performance as maybe they did have in Bahrain. So we're getting into that tonight ahead of this Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So yeah, fingers crossed. But after last week, I don't really have the highest of hopes, let's say, because, and I don't know what you guys think, but for me, Bahrain, considering how easy it is to overtake there, it's kind of a good marker for the season you're going to have in terms of what type of Bahrain Grand Prix you have. And I mean, we saw a couple years ago, 2021, amazing Bahrain Grand Prix turned into an amazing season. But obviously, with the one we had last week, it was, very, very underwhelming. And I'm just hoping that we're not in for, say, 2023 Part 2, but even worse. That would be really bad if we got that again. But we'll have to see, of course, whether Bahrain was, whether that was a true indicator as to the season ahead or not. Of course, here at the Jeddah circuit, there are plenty of chances to overtake. We've seen great racing here before. Let's hope we get it once again. But hello to you guys watching. Hope you're all doing well. And to everyone in the chat, hello as well. And no matter where you are in the world, what time zone you're in, hope you're all having as best a time as possible. And yeah, what we're going to be getting into in this weekend preview is going through, of course, a bit of what happened in Bahrain, looking at, obviously, the championship standings as a result of what happened in Bahrain. Later on, we'll be looking at, again, the issues that Mercedes and Ferrari had, also getting into a touch some news in regards to Max Verstappen and where he might be next season, and also some very interesting news regarding the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, in regards to, let's say, an integrity issue with Mohammed. So we'll get on to him later in the stream. Again, we're not going to touch on it massively because it's not really to do with the on-track stuff, and we're probably going to touch on it more in a stream that I'm going to do next week, where we'll probably get into a bit more detail as to what exactly that is all about and what could come of that. So yeah, like I said, I will touch on it at least. And of course, I'll get into my predictions for the weekend, for the qualifying, for the race, and just in general go team by team and give a quick heads up as to what I am expecting at this Grand Prix weekend. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing, and hopefully you guys will be joining me in doing that as well. There is a poll running at the top of the live chat where I've asked you guys who is most likely to put up a challenge to Red Bull at this weekend's 2024 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So let's get into it, and we'll start with how the championship looks. Of course, only one race down, so it doesn't really matter, but we'll have a look anyway. Max Verstappen in the lead by 8 points from Sergio Perez. Carlos Sainz in third, Leclerc fourth, Russell fifth, Norris sixth, Hamilton seventh, Piastri eighth, Alonso ninth, and Lance Stroll in P10. And slightly more interesting is the constructor standings. Red Bull in the lead by 17 points. Ferrari in second, 11 points clear of Mercedes in third. McLaren just behind in fourth. Aston Martin in fifth. Sauber sixth because they had the best finish of everyone else below the top 5 teams in the Bahrain Grand Prix, with Zhou finishing in 11th. Haas 7th. Racing Bulls 8th. Williams in 9th. And then Alpine in P10. Rock bottom of the championship. And given how Alpine's car looks, doesn't really look like it's going to be getting any better, let's say, going forward. So, I'll just come back to here and queue up what we're going to be talking about. And we'll start, I think, with Ferrari. I'm just going to quickly find the story on Twitter. And then, and then I'll get it up on the screen. So, just give me a moment, guys. And actually, then we get the actual story up from pitdebrief.com. And I'll just quickly display this on screen. So, hold on. Go. So, Fred Vasseur, this is him talking about how he's been left, or Ferrari been left with mixed feelings after Leclerc had brake issues in the Bahrain Grand Prix. And he went on to say after the race, you can say a bit of mixed feeling after the race for sure. The positive is that we were able to do pole position yesterday. We did the fastest lap of the session. And then he went on to say, and perhaps we compensated for 50% of the gap with Red Bull in the race compared to 1 year ago, because we were at 50-something seconds in the race. The negative is that it's not enough, and that we again had too many issues during the weekend, but we need to fix the issue on Charles's car with the brakes. And Vasseur praised Leclerc for effectively managing the problem, saying, quote, I think overall he did a very good job, and then from the pit wall also, because we were able to manage the situation, to save P4 in these conditions. Honestly, during the first stint when I saw the situation, I was not very optimistic. And then he added that the exact cause of the issue is still unknown, by saying, quote, we don't know yet. The car's still in part firme. This was obviously just after the Grand Prix. But basically, he says that they had a huge delta of temperature between the left and right brake. He was pulling on the braking and locking, and it was very difficult to fix it. So essentially, Leclerc had a massive temperature difference between the two brakes, and the car, I think as he was saying at the time, Leclerc on the radio, the car felt like it was pulling in certain directions. And yeah, he just couldn't really control the car in the way that maybe he could later on in the race when the issue wasn't, I don't think, as bad. But obviously made quite a few mistakes. But on reflection, Leclerc had an issue. And looking back, I think, yeah, it was pretty clear it was an issue, because I don't think a driver of his quality would make that many mistakes, just that easily in, it was like the first 20 laps or something, wasn't it, in the Grand Prix. So, yeah, with Leclerc and Ferrari overall from Bahrain, I don't think we saw their true potential, because we saw in Bahrain in qualifying and at times through the weekend that Leclerc, as we expected, had the better pace compared to teammate Carlos Sainz, and Leclerc was able to get more out of the car than Carlos Sainz. So Leclerc, I mean, maybe he wouldn't have been that far ahead of his teammate if that issue had not happened for him, but Ferrari as a team with both cars undoubtedly would have been closer to Red Bull had he not had that problem. And according to Ferrari, I think they also said they were losing about 0.6 of a second per lap because of that issue. So if, you take away the time lost for Leclerc because of that problem, Leclerc probably could have finished in second place. Maybe he wouldn't have, because Sergio Perez, I think, could have, in that second half of the race, probably pushed harder than he did. But the point is Leclerc and Ferrari definitely had more pace in the bag than what they showed in that Bahrain Grand Prix. And also, so did Mercedes. Let me just queue up this story quickly, because they had issues with really the cooling in Bahrain, and were having to really manage things in the Grand Prix. Let me just see if I can find on Twitter. Let's see if I can find somewhere where I can show from a good source that Mercedes did have these issues. Let me just try and find it if I can quickly. Well, yeah, let me just show this a second. So basically, and let me hold on, just zoom in this tweet. So after the Grand Prix, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff said that because they were struggling with cooling and they forecast that the race would be cooler than it actually was, they had to turn down the power unit for quite a bit of the Grand Prix to manage their car and bring it home, costing them half a second or around half a second per lap. And this is what George Russell had to say post-race. He said, quote, "It's nothing really to be concerned about. All we needed to do was put slightly bigger bodywork on. It may have cost us a quarter of a tenth, but we wouldn't have had to lose 4/10. Our forecast of the conditions were incorrect. Ultimately, it cost us a lot." So basically, as I just said, Mercedes thought it was going to be a bit cooler than it was, and it punished them in the race. So, with them ending up, what was it, 46 seconds, I think it was, off the pace? That is not a true indication of their pace either. And you can see here, if I just go on this picture, that's the cooling there on the Mercedes car. And here from Denny, who is a bit of an interesting Twitter account, but they do post reliable information pretty much all the time. It says here, Mercedes made the decision to close the cooling louvres they had left open in previous sessions, including practice 2. The choice to close them for the race backfired, as it brought them power unit issues they were facing, essentially overheating. So yeah, that is why Mercedes were not quite as quick as we were expecting in the Bahrain Grand Prix. And if you take away, the time lost for Mercedes in the Bahrain Grand Prix, not saying they would have been on the podium, but they would have been pretty close to it. So Ferrari and Mercedes, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, Red Bull dominated, and Red Bull still, even without those issues for Ferrari and Mercedes, Red Bull do still have the best car on the grid, but the gap is not as big as it may have seemed in Bahrain. It is really not, that big. I think really in Bahrain, if you take away the issues that Leclerc had, I think Red Bull were only probably 0.2 of a second per lap quicker than Ferrari per lap. And if you look at, if you look at, Red Bull versus Mercedes, I think Mercedes were probably, instead of being nearly a second per lap slower, I think it was probably more like half a second, maybe just under that per lap slower than Red Bull. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you are a Ferrari or a Mercedes fan, don't be going too overboard thinking, oh, the season's over, we're not going to win a race, nobody can get close to Red Bull, because I don't think that is strictly true. I think there definitely will be Grand Prix this season where teams can compete with Red Bull. Maybe even this weekend's Grand Prix at the Jeddah circuit could be one. So yeah, if you're a Ferrari or a Mercedes fan, don't be too down on your chances, going forward for the next few races. As Rooksfoot just saying on the chat. So they knew they had a brake issue, but they still made Carlos have to overtake him twice with the pit strat. Well, yeah, it's Ferrari. Let's not try and make sense of their decisions. And yeah, just a couple more things I want to get onto before we really start to get into Saudi Arabia for this weekend's race. Let me just see if I can find it. Yeah, and I'll have this wait the thing to show quickly as a little bit. Right. And this the source is F1insider.com and many people reporting this. So you may have heard that Jos Verstappen, I think, was it the day after the race, he was coming out and talking about how Christian Horner, the team boss of Red Bull, needs to leave, and that it's going to really affect the team if he's staying. And it did cause quite a stir after Red Bull's win in Bahrain, and that has caused rumours to fly around that Max Verstappen, even for next season, obviously with Lewis Hamilton vacating his seat, that Max Verstappen might be going to Mercedes. And according to F1insider.com and others, there is allegedly an exit clause in Max Verstappen's contract that allows him to leave Red Bull if Helmut Marko does. And then Helmut Marko came out a couple of days ago and said, quote, "As far as I'm concerned, I won't get in Max's way if basically he wants to leave," and that Toto Wolff now sees a real chance to put Verstappen in a Mercedes next year. And here's proof that there is actually an article about that. It is legit. Now, and you can see here, Max in a Mercedes uniform. How incredible would that be if it does happen? Here's why, though, I think this is not entirely bullshit, because after the Hamilton to Ferrari news, you never really know anymore. But here's why I think it is probably bullshit, this story. Jos Verstappen, it's become clear now to me and to everyone that he was the one who leaked this Horner story about the way he was treating what's the best way to phrase it? The relations he was having with a certain member of his own team. It's clear that Jos Verstappen is the one that leaked that to Dutch media with the way he's speaking at the moment. Essentially, with Jos Verstappen's comments after the Grand Prix about Horner, talking about how he needs to leave and that the team, would be better off without him, Jos Verstappen is using Max Verstappen leaving as a ploy, essentially, to get rid of Christian Horner, and is trying to force Red Bull's hand and say, look, if you don't get rid of Horner, then Max will leave, and then probably Adrian Newey will leave, and the whole dream team, essentially, will be broken up. That is what I think is happening. We've seen it before in football. We've seen it in other sports where sports people will use certain, they'll threaten to do certain things purely as a ploy to get what they want. I remember in, talking of football, I think Sergio Ramos a few years ago, there was rumours of him going to Manchester United from Real Madrid, and it turned out really that it was a ploy just for him to get a new contract. That is not exactly the same as what's happening here, but it is kind of on the same page. They are trying to use the possibility of Max leaving, as a ploy to get rid of Christian Horner. Now, if it is true that Horner staying means that Max, Helmut Marko, and Adrian Newey would leave, then really Red Bull, the best thing to do in that situation clearly is to get rid of Horner, because it's not worth losing so many key personnel over something so stupid that, of course, Christian Horner has done. So that's what I think of the Mercedes rumours. I don't think that they are really that legitimate. And I do think that a lot of journalists out there are really reading into things a bit too much and are doing what I've coined before. No one else, I don't think, has talked about this or coined this term. Um, it's a bit of a silly term, but it's something I like to call 1+1 = 2 journalism. And what that is where they'll take one thing, add it with another thing, and think that it equals this or equals whatever they want it to equal. So in this case, yeah, there probably is an exit clause in Max's contract. I'm pretty sure there's an exit clause in a lot of drivers' contracts. That's one thing. And then Lewis Hamilton obviously leaving Mercedes to go to Ferrari, meaning there's a vacant seat. That's another thing. They've added those two things together and they think all of a sudden, oh, Max could be going to Mercedes. I just don't see why Max would go there. It just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. Why would he leave the best team in Formula One to go to a Mercedes team that hasn't built hasn't built a race-winning car for a couple years and has not been anywhere near as good of a team as Red Bull Racing? Why would he do that? It just, again, it doesn't make sense. People may say, oh, for 2026, maybe he thinks he's got a better bet of long-term success going to Mercedes as opposed to staying with Red Bull, when, of course, Red Bull's engine program for 2026 is not as assured of a success as maybe Mercedes are, given that Mercedes, are very experienced in the game. I can see people saying that, but at the end of the day, even with Mercedes, there is no guarantee that they're going to have the best power unit in 2026. And the best thing to do, I think, really for all the drivers, is to make sure they are driving for the same team in 2026 they were in 2025, because you don't want to you don't want to jump ship to a team and then end up going from, a front-running team to very back of the grid or anything like that, because that will absolutely destroy your career. So yeah, I don't think Max Verstappen is going to Mercedes. I just don't. I don't see it. I don't think. I don't think it's going to happen. I did see Tomo, of course, you guys know, F1 YouTuber. He did a video about how he thinks it makes actually a lot more sense, which I just disagree with. And I think, at least with the thumbnail, he was trying to kind of compare it to Hamilton leaving McLaren back in 2012 to go to Mercedes. Those two situations, if Max was to leave Red Bull for Mercedes, it's not similar at all. McLaren, when Lewis Hamilton left McLaren were not by far the best team in F1. They were not dominating Formula One. They had a title-winning car, but it was not, they weren't miles clear of everybody else winning the title easily every season like Red Bull are. Max leaving Red Bull to go to Mercedes would be more similar to Michael Schumacher leaving Benetton to go to Ferrari. That is a much better example of what that would be. But Michael going to Ferrari, there was two reasons why Michael went. One, because it's Ferrari, and secondly, because he wanted the challenge of taking Ferrari back to the very top. Mercedes don't have quite that pull that Ferrari do, and I don't think Max really wants to be, possibly in a car that for a few years is not that great. I mean, he had a few years of that before this Red Bull dominance, so I don't think he wants to go back to that, to be honest. So, yeah, I don't think Max is going to Mercedes. I just don't think that's going to happen. And as well, with, from Mercedes' perspective, it doesn't really make a ton of sense either, because they've got in their driver academy potentially the next Max Verstappen in Kimi Antonelli. So why would you put Max in the car when you've already got possibly a new, just as good, much younger Max Verstappen that you're going to, have in the car probably next season? It just, yeah, I just don't think it makes sense overall. It's not impossible. Not saying it's, there's zero chance of it happening. Of course, there is a chance of it happening, but I just don't see why Max would go, and I don't see again why Mercedes would basically give up on Antonelli to put Verstappen in their car when again they possibly have, the next Max Verstappen already waiting in the wings, going to be in the car probably for next season if he delivers in Formula 2. So, yeah, it just wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. But again, it's not impossible. And I know, what was it? I think Toto Wolff said, there's always, a small chance that, or there is always a chance that it could happen. I mean, that's technically true with a lot of drivers on the grid. I mean, Fernando Alonso, for example, it's possible he could go to Mercedes, but I don't think he will go to Mercedes, and I think that is very unlikely as well. So, yeah. And the final thing we'll go on to, because there's been quite a lot of news that has been flying around since the last Grand Prix. Let's get into this news regarding Mohammed Ben Sulayem. And let me just get this article up. Zoom in a bit as well. So, the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, is under investigation for alleged attempt to interfere over F1 race. This was, well, quite the shock when this came out. And then what does it say? I'll go into the main part of the allegation. I'm not going to go through all of it because again, I want to get into more of this probably next week. So we have some content. So a whistleblower has told the FIA that Ben Sulayem allegedly intervened to overturn a penalty given to Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso at the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. If you remember, guys, Alonso finished third at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix of last year. And if you remember, got a penalty because I think during what was it? It was like something silly. What was it? I think he served a penalty for it. Was it a jump start? I think it was. Yeah, he had a 5-second or 10-second penalty, something like that, for a jump start, Alonso, and a mechanic was touching the car during the time that they waited, to serve that penalty, and then Alonso was disqualified, and then I think was it a day or two later he was undisqualified. So the first allegation, is that the FIA president intervened to overturn this penalty, and the allegation made by the whistleblower is that Ben Sulayem called Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, quite a long name, the FIA's Vice President for Sport for the Middle East and North Africa region, who was in Saudi Arabia for the race in an official capacity, and made it clear he thought Alonso's penalty should be revoked. The thing is, though, in terms of the way that's worded, the FIA president, telling this guy that he thinks the penalty should be revoked. I mean, is that enough to say that he interfered with the Formula 1 race result? Is that enough evidence to say that he legitimately got that penalty overturned by saying that he thought it should be revoked, the penalty? That's going to be a tricky one to prove, but I'm sure the FIA, who are investigating it, at least I hope, have more evidence than we have so far. And then if there's this from a day later and a day ago. even further allegations that the FIA president allegedly told officials not to certify the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And the claim is from the same whistleblower who accused Ben Sulayem of allegedly telling officials to overturn a penalty for Alonso in Saudi Arabia last year. The whistleblower says they were told, quote, on behest of the FIA president, to find a way not to pass circuit safe for racing. And the claim is in a report by the FIA's compliance officer to its ethics committee. Now, again, whether this is true, we're not going to know yet. I am very curious to see what the result of this investigation will be. As I said, though, with the allegation in regards to the Alonso penalty, if it's true that he let the FIA vice president for the Middle East and North Africa region, if he let that person know that he thought Alonso's penalty should be overturned, again, if that's all the evidence he has, it's going to be tough to prove that, he actually interfered with the Formula One race result. Because, did the FIA president, did he actually tell the guy, you need to try and, get this overturned? Because there's a big difference between telling someone you think a penalty should be overturned and telling someone you need to try and get this penalty overturned. There's a big difference between those two things. So, again, we'll see what happens. We'll see if there's any further evidence to come out. And then with the Las Vegas thing, again, if that is true, that claim, then obviously not good. But at least I can see where the FIA president was coming from. At least I can, agree with the sentiment in terms of the safety aspect. But the thing is that we need to wonder is, was he actually caring, the FIA president, about the safety of the circuit? Or was that just a way of getting back at Liberty Media? Because we know the last couple years, the FIA and the FIA president and Liberty Media have been at war. The FIA president has a very much an opposing view to what Liberty Media and the teams have when it comes to a lot of situations, especially when it comes to the financial side and the revenue side of Formula One, and just the direction that Formula One is going in. For example, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, was very approving, by the sounds of it, of Andretti coming into Formula One. The teams and Liberty Media, not so much. So this is just a further continuation of that battle. But again, these are allegations. Doesn't mean they are true. There is no current evidence out there that we can find that can prove that these allegations are indeed fact. So let's not go overboard and start claiming that these things happen. Because again, they are allegations. But I am very interested to see what the result will be of those allegations and whether there is any proper evidence for them. So yeah, we will find out in due course. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a stream next weekend, obviously, because next weekend there is no Grand Prix, so I need to do some sort of content to keep you guys entertained. And yeah, next Sunday I will be doing a stream in between this Grand Prix and the next one in Australia. And what we'll probably do is go into a bit more detail about the case. And if there is any more bits of news, bits of evidence, or we hear the result of the investigation between now and then of course we will go through it. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Very interested to see what happens there. And if there is damning evidence found and he's found guilty, then he has to resign. There is no doubt about that. But again, there are allegations. We have no facts yet. Let's see what happens. But coming out of Bahrain, yeah, that's all the news we've had in the last few days. Quite a lot of news, I have to say. So yeah, we'll see what happens with all of those stories, whether Max does go to Mercedes and whether, what do you call it, whether the Red Bull team does fall apart. We'll have to see in the next, I guess, few months for that. And then, yeah, with the FIA president, we'll have to see, hopefully, the next few weeks what happens with that investigation. By the way, just a quick update in regards to my channel schedule ahead of this Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. In 2 days' time, it will be qualifying day. Once again on a Friday because of Ramadan, so that's why the race is on Saturday. So I will be live next after tonight on Friday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. UK time for the qualifying watch along for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And then on Saturday, I'll be going live 2.5 hours before the race starts at 2:30 p.m. UK time for the race watch along on Saturday. And I will be joined as well by my co-commentator Niblo, hopefully for a bit of a better race than what we had in Bahrain. So if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for more content like this, because we do weekend previews, qualifying and race watch alongs for every Grand Prix, and we'll be doing so, of course, this year. And as well, if you haven't already, smash that like button. Let's try and get up to 25 plus likes if we can in the next few minutes. And talking off schedules, hold on. I just forgot something. You couldn't quite hear me for a second there. It's because I forgot to add my mic to this particular scene on OBS. But yeah, here is the schedule for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend. So tomorrow is practice day, and practice 1 at 1:30 till 2:30 p.m. Of course, all these times are UK time, GMT. So yeah, practice 1, 1:30 till 2:30 p.m. and then practice 2, 5 till 6 p.m. And then on Friday, qualifying day, of course, practice 3, 1:30 till 2:30 p.m. again, just like practice 1. And then qualifying beginning at 5 p.m. and then the race on Saturday beginning at 5 p.m. So, yeah, hopefully you guys can remember that. Pretty simple. The most important sessions starting at 5 p.m. UK time for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But before we go on to a bit more of, this weekend's Grand Prix and how I think things will shape up, let's go into some of your comments in the chat to get your thoughts on certain things, some bits of news that have happened so far in the last few days that I've just gone through. And as well, make sure to keep voting in that poll at the top of the live chat. Who do you think will most likely challenge Red Bull this weekend? I want to know who you think, guys. Who you guys think will? Frank's saying Mercedes have always had cooling issues. Yeah, they have at other races. They, I think it's just the way they design their cars. Sometimes they try to cut it a bit fine, a bit more than other teams. Cooling. Michael Gott says it's interesting to see how teams fare against Red Bull at street circuits. Bulls were bad at street circuits last year. The thing is, though, with this circuit, it's a street circuit, but it's very, high speed for a street circuit. Because normally street circuits, you get lots of slow speed corners because that's just, what you're having to deal with. But at this Jeddah circuit, even though the track is a bit tight, there isn't really any slower speed corners where we know the Red Bull car isn't quite as strong. Yeah, there isn't a lot of them at this track. Of course, you've got turn 1 and turn 2, but after that, there's not too many more of them. And the final corner obviously is one. So yeah, I don't think this particular Grand Prix really counts as like a proper. I mean, it's a street circuit, but I don't think it's like a typical street circuit. Let's say like Monaco, Singapore, Baku, places like that. Well, we saw last year Red Bull weren't quite as good as they were around higher speed racetracks like in even like Jeddah last year. Um, Paulie saying that Max most likely 2026 with the engine change. Cannot see Max throwing away a championship. Marco will possibly retire in 2026 and become head of the FIA with Gunter. Yeah. I can't see Max, leaving Red Bull and, like you say, throwing away a really a guaranteed championship winning year in 2025, because if Red Bull keep up their pace, which they're going to, let's be honest, Red Bull would have to make quite the mess for them to give away the advantage I think they've got at the moment, with also the amazing driver they've got as well. They're going to win the title this year, and they're going to win it probably next season as well. So, for Verstappen, would he really take the risk of going to Mercedes and give up, the chance to win title number 5? I just don't see why he would, do that. And again, yeah, going to Mercedes, maybe for 2026, it will, be a good decision. Maybe Mercedes in 2026 will have one of the best engines on the grid, meaning they'll have one of the best, overall cars on the grid. But there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee. We have to remember, with these new power unit regulations, and the really Formula One is going to be more about the power units in 2026 because of how important they'll be to the overall performance of the cars. If you look at the last time we had a regulation change when it came to the engines of these cars, it was back in a major one. It was back in 2014. Back in 2014, there was only 3 power unit manufacturers on the grid: Mercedes, Ferrari, and Renault. And Mercedes had really 2 to 3 years of unlimited development on the V6 hybrids, because obviously their car in the V8 era at the time was a midfield car most of the time. So they didn't really have to bother around too much with what they already had, because they knew they were building something special for 2014. It's different to now, where Mercedes have put a lot of development into into the current car, and the Mercedes team is not what it once was back 12, 13, 14 even years ago. So there is no guarantee at all that Mercedes will be the kings of the new era coming in 2026. It wouldn't surprise me if they were, but I don't think it's going to be the same as what we saw in 2014, when Mercedes are going to have by far the best engine and are going to be, miles clear of the rest of the field. Remember, again, in 2014, there was only 3 power unit manufacturers: Mercedes, Ferrari, Renault. In 2026, you're going to have the Red Bull powertrain. You're going to have, obviously Ferrari, Mercedes, Honda. They're going to be powering Aston Martin. You're going to have Renault. You're going to have Audi, and maybe even a couple power unit manufacturers coming in a bit later. So there'll be a lot more competition, and for me, less chance of domination for Mercedes than than they had back then. So no guarantees. It is truly going to be very, very interesting when we get to 2026, which I know seems far away, but it really isn't. It's only a couple years away, or less than a couple now away. It's going to be very interesting to see who turns up with, in terms of the power units, who turns up with the best and the worst, because I think it will be a bit surprising with certain teams and certain manufacturers as to who is quick and who isn't. I don't think we're going to see just all of the top teams maintain their advantages. Music Monster Man says Come's video was absurd. I think he knew it too. Probs just made it for clicks. I didn't watch too much of it, but I mean, yeah. You know, I think there you know, other people out there that are maybe making content on that particular story, I think are really clutching at straws if they think that there's a good chance of that happening. Frank says exactly, Chazza. McLaren were slowly falling or failing, falling actually, when Lewis stepped away. Yeah, it's not a similar situation at all. A more, if you were to compare it to that time period, it'd be more like, let's say Sebastian Vettel left Red Bull in 2012 to go to Ferrari at the time. That is what it would be more so similar to, something like that. Or as I said, when Michael Schumacher left Benetton to go to Ferrari, it'd be more similar to that than Hamilton going to Mercedes. And I've noticed a lot of people are obsessed with Hamilton's move, to Mercedes in terms of, like, obviously it was the greatest driver move ever. It was, it really made Hamilton's career. Because if he didn't move to Mercedes, he'd probably be, no more than a 3-time champion, because he would have been in a dead car for years. And yeah, it was an amazing driver move in the end. But we can't use that as justification for why other driver moves could or should happen. I've seen it a lot, people using it as a, well, Hamilton, he made the gamble of going to Mercedes. It's like, yeah, true, but that is, that doesn't happen every time. A driver move that successful for the driver doesn't happen all the time. In fact, if you look at most top drivers when they move to another team, it won't make, in terms of it being a good move, you don't really see that happen as quickly as it did for Hamilton, where immediately Mercedes in 2013 were quicker than McLaren by, quite a bit. And then obviously in 2014, Mercedes were dominating one. So, yeah, I think that example is used a bit too often, to be honest, even though, yeah, it is a great case of a driver move working out, no doubt about it. We'll find some other comments here. Greetings, Chazza. Greetings to you. Hope you're doing well. Paulie says, with Vegas, it was apparently that he wanted more money and was trying to block for this reason. Again, I don't know if that is actually true. So we'll leave that as just an allegation. Prank saying, I'm still pissed about Andretti BS. Yeah. Still pisses me off how they've, been left off at the moment for 2026. And a couple people made this point on Twitter, I think a couple days ago, with the news about, the FIA president and that it really has not helped Andretti at all. Because, of course, the FIA president, Ben Sulayem, is very much on the pro Andretti side. And if he was to leave, even if it was for right reasons, that would hurt. That would hurt quite a bit. So, yeah, we will see how it all shakes out off track. Quick Scott says Hamilton moves resembles his move from McLaren in the trajectory of the team. Are you talking about Hamilton going to Ferrari, or are you talking about Max possibly going to Mercedes? I'm not sure in terms of what you're referencing. If you're talking about Hamilton going to Ferrari, then yeah, I think that, it's possible, maybe not to the extent that, McLaren fell away as badly as they did. But, yeah, we'll obviously have to see. But let's go into the teams and get into how I think they'll do at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix of 2024. So we'll start with Red Bull Racing, and yeah, of course, they dominated the Bahrain Grand Prix, and the worst thing for their competition is I actually think this track suits their car better. Obviously, the Bahrain track, very rear limited, got a lot of fast corners, which we know the Red Bull car does like quite a lot. A lot more high-speed corners here, though, in Jeddah, so I think they will be clearly the best team here. They will not be miles away in qualifying from teams like Ferrari and Mercedes, but still a bit too quick and will have definitely too much pace in the Grand Prix compared to the rest. So yeah, Red Bull I think will have the best car here. And at the moment, given where the field is at, I think it's going to take probably a not a massive upgrade from teams like Ferrari and Mercedes, but it's going to take a big-ish upgrade from those teams if they're going to get on the same footing as the Red Bull team. Because again, just like we saw in 2023, Red Bull are just a bit too far ahead. They're not miles ahead. They're not like a second per lap quicker, but they are just a bit too far in the distance. Ferrari had a very good pace in Bahrain, and I think they'll keep that up here in Saudi Arabia. I think they will have definitely, outside of Red Bull, a very good chance of being high up on the grid. I think Ferrari, to be honest, looking at the lap overall, I think they've got a decent opportunity of maybe taking a front row, maybe even getting on pole position if they can really pull out a great qualifying lap towards the end of Q3, which of course we saw in Bahrain they didn't quite do. So pole position not impossible, but I don't think it's as possible here as it was in Bahrain. Bahrain just suits their car better, I think. But I think they will have the second best car through the weekend. And one good thing we saw in Bahrain is that with Carlos Sainz's car, which was working a lot better than Leclerc's, and compared to the Mercedes cars, even though Mercedes had their issues of cooling, Ferrari did seem just a bit quicker than Mercedes over the race runs. So I think Ferrari are going to be, through the weekend, not by miles, but I think they will be the second best team through the weekend. And if there is any team that is going to put up a fight against Red Bull, I think realistically, we've got to say at this current moment in time, it's going to be the Ferrari team. For Mercedes, though, their car, again, when they're not having to turn the power unit down for cooling issues, it is a good car. It's a much better car than what we saw this time last year, and they're definitely going to have a better Grand Prix here in Saudi Arabia on pace compared to Red Bull they did last year, where they were I think it was 1.2 seconds a lap slower in the race. They're not going to be quite that far off this weekend. I think they've definitely got a decent opportunity of maybe a second row position. I don't think they've got enough pace to be in the top three. Just don't think the car is quite strong enough, especially in the middle and final sector down the straights. They do still have a bit of a deficit at high speed to the Mercedes team. So, yeah, I think they'll be around probably 4th, 5th, 6th at best. Again, there is definitely an opportunity of a second row position in, say, 4th place. But I think, again, top 3, a bit too far for them. Do watch out, though, for George Russell, because he has been very competitive here in his 2 races for Mercedes, especially compared to Lewis Hamilton, who I'm not really expecting a great weekend from, I have to say, given his last 2 outings here in Saudi Arabia. McLaren, I mean, they had a decent qualifying in Bahrain, but their race pace, honestly, I thought was quite disappointing. They weren't even quicker overall than Mercedes, and Mercedes had their cooling issues. So, yeah, McLaren are quite comfortably the 4th best team and are still quite a bit away from Ferrari and Mercedes, and definitely need a bit of in-season development to get themselves going in 2024. But I think, they can still have a decent qualifying here. Watch out for Oscar Piastri. Very, very good last year. Remember, in the McLaren that was so bad, he ended up starting, I think, from 8th place on the grid, did Piastri. And his teammate, Lando Norris, obviously made a mistake and was at the back of the grid, I believe. So, yeah, watch out for Piastri. McLaren, I think, will be slower overall than Mercedes, but if Lewis Hamilton is having some struggles like he has had at this track in the past couple years, I think he can be exploited, and McLaren can at least get a car in between Russell and Hamilton. So in qualifying, I think McLaren have definitely got enough pace with the two drivers they've got to be competitive-ish with Mercedes. But in the race, I think still comfortably they are fourth best team and not quite quick enough to be thinking about racing for a podium just yet. But this McLaren car, again, I do think it's a bit better fundamentally than people give it credit for. And I think definitely when they get some upgrades on the car, it will be performing much better very soon. Aston Martin, though, despite a very good qualifying from Alonso, they were very, very disappointing in Saudi Arabia. Not in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain. They were, with Alonso, what was it, a minute and 25 seconds behind Max Verstappen by the end? I mean, another probably 10 laps in that race, and both Aston Martins would have been lapped. It was that poor a pace, and they were nowhere near the top 4 teams of Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, or McLaren. And in fact, they were closer to the midfield by quite a bit. So yeah, very disappointing pace. Aston Martin have been one of the biggest, I think, disappointments coming out of testing, as I thought maybe their car was a bit more back to what we saw last year at the early point of the year. But yeah, they have made no progress really over the winter. I don't think they'll be as far off Red Bull here, as I do think the first sector especially will suit their car a bit more than quite a lot of the parts of the Bahrain track, but they are nowhere near the top 4 teams. They are at best the 5th best team on the grid, and if they are going to be fighting for podiums this season, they need a shit ton of in-season development to get anywhere near a podium in 2024. And at this point, I'd say they are probably a midfield team, and very close, could argue, to being a front-running team, but I think they're more so a midfield team at this current point of 2024. Racing Bulls were a bit disappointing in Bahrain. I mean, their race pace wasn't that bad. Wasn't as bad as what I was expecting to be after the practice 2 session that weekend. But, obviously their 2 drivers had a bit of a spat, didn't they? Tsunoda and Ricciardo. And with that little incident they had, obviously, Ricciardo being let through, or the team, forcing Tsunoda to let Ricciardo through, it was the right decision from the team to tell Tsunoda to let Ricciardo through because, Ricciardo was faster. They should, though, have let Tsunoda back through. That is one thing they should have done. But Tsunoda's behaviour after the race, locking up on the cool-down lap and then nearly hitting Ricciardo on the exit of turn 8, very childish and needs to stop that out because that is more of the old Yuki Tsunoda. We don't want to see that. But I think this track, we'll see a bit more of the potential of the Racing Bulls car. And I think they will be probably just outside of the top 10. I think they'll be fighting probably with the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg, who I think will have a very strong weekend like he had in Bahrain, except for the race. But Haas, as we saw, their race pace and overall pace has improved quite a bit. So it's going to be an interesting fight, I think, between Haas and the Racing Bulls team. We'll see who ends up quicker. But yeah, I think they've got a decent car there, but kind of like McLaren, they've got a decent car, but they just need some development in season to really get that car going and get it up to, let's say, its maximum potential in 2024. So hopefully we'll see some of that soon. I think they are actually bringing a couple upgrades here, but I don't think it's anything massive. I think it's only just a couple small parts. But yeah, I think this team, I still have a decent feeling about them, and I think they will get better as the season goes on. But yeah, I think for this weekend, they might be able to nick a point, but most likely they'll have both their cars just outside of the top 10, but they won't be a million miles away. Alpine, shower of shit. Their two drivers are pretty good around this track, so I think they might not be as bad as what we saw in Bahrain. Ocon, of course, has been incredible here since we started coming here in 2021. Was he on the podium here in 2021? No, he's very close. He missed out by like a few thousandths of a second compared to Bottas, and obviously last year I think qualified in the top 6 for Alpine. So watch out for Ocon. Maybe if the car is a slight bit stronger here, they can get at least one Alpine car out of Q1. But I think that would be quite a stretch because I do think their car is very bad. The technical director, by the way, and the chief designer of Alpine have already resigned after just one Grand Prix. This entire team is falling apart. Williams, pretty mediocre first Grand Prix in Bahrain, 15th and 20th. Logan Sargent, by the way, I found out what that issue was. His brake bias on his steering wheel, the drivers, to add or get rid of some brake bias, they do it on the steering wheel by pushing certain buttons. And it turned out that as Sargent was going up to turn 4, when he locked up and went deep, his steering wheel started adding infinitely more brake bias to the brakes and to his car. So that's why he went deep and was confused as to what on earth happened to the car. And obviously they went with a new steering wheel, and then he was able to finish the race. But a shame that happened for Logan, because he was having a decent race. He was up in, I think, 14th place or something like that. But overall, Williams' car was not very quick in Bahrain. And to be honest, I'm not really expecting them to be that quick here. Could see Albon maybe qualifying in like a P12, P13 like he did in Bahrain, but I definitely do not fancy them to score a point here in Saudi Arabia. And really, until they bring a big upgrade, I don't think Williams have got a car worthy of scoring points at this current moment in time. I don't think they've got a car really on the same level as the Haas, and I don't think really have a car fundamentally as good as, like, say, the Racing Bulls car. So, yeah, not a great start for Williams, and just in general, not a great car. Steak or Sauber, whatever you want to call them. Good race result, but their car not really that great in Bahrain. I am curious, though, to see here where aero is a bit more important than it is in Bahrain because of that first sector. I'm curious to see if their pace will improve, because they were surprisingly poor in qualifying, 16th and 17th. And then suddenly in the race, Zhou Guanyu was able to finish up in P11. So I'm interested to see whether was Bahrain just a bad one-off Grand Prix, or are they going to be, like that going forward for the season. So yeah, very interested to see what goes down. I don't think they'll score a point this weekend, but I'm interested to see at this type of track where they will sit. And the final team, who on pace were brilliant in Bahrain, the Haas F1 team. Kevin Magnussen finished up in P12, not a million miles away from a point. Hulkenberg, of course, qualified P10, hit Lance Stroll at the start, so really destroyed his Grand Prix. And I have to say, with Hulkenberg, I was surprised. I don't think he was given a penalty for that accident. I can't remember him being given a penalty. And yeah, very surprised about that. I know he cost himself, but still surprised that he didn't get anything for that, if that is the case. But yeah, Haas, their car was a lot quicker through the race than it was last year. They were a lot more competitive. The car is actually able to manage its tyres. And Bahrain is a pretty good test of managing tyres. So I think Haas this weekend are going to be the best or the strongest midfield runner. Watch out for them. And they might be able to spring a surprise here if the teams, say maybe a couple of the front runners ahead, are not too far away from them, in, say, qualifying. So yeah, watch out for Haas and for Nico Hulkenberg, who once again having brilliant qualifying results in that Haas car. Just seen in chat, Quick Scott saying McLaren may be strong here. Top speed is strong this year, along with medium and high speed corners. Yeah, McLaren, I think, will be closer on pace to, say, Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. At least in the race, but I still think fundamentally they've got the fourth best car. But again, they will be closer, no doubt about that. But let's get into my predictions for qualifying and the race. These are my initial predictions for qualifying and the race. And obviously top 10 for both. So yeah, my initial predictions, not my final predictions, so don't take them too seriously. But for qualifying, I think Max will be on pole by about 0.2 of a second clear of Leclerc in second, Perez just behind in third, and then I'm going Russell fourth, Carlos Sainz in fifth, Oscar Piastri in sixth, Lewis Hamilton in P7, Lando Norris eighth, Fernando Alonso ninth, and Nico Hulkenberg in 10th. And in the race, I don't see it being really that great of a race, and I think it'll be a pretty standard Grand Prix, with Max Verstappen winning yet again from Sergio Perez in second. Charles Leclerc will finish in third. I've gone for the gaps there, the predicted gaps, and how far behind I think all the drivers will be by the end. So I think Leclerc will be about 25 seconds behind race winner Max Verstappen, with Carlos Sainz in fourth, George Russell fifth, Lewis Hamilton sixth, Piastri in seventh, Lando Norris eighth, Fernando Alonso ninth, and finishing in P10, I think, will be Nico Hulkenberg. So there you go. Those are my predictions for the weekend. Let me know in the comments, what do you think is going to go down at the Jeddah circuit in Saudi Arabia? Ronan says, do you still not really rate Hulkenberg? I rate him at the moment, but I still don't think he's a guy that was ever gonna get into a top team and like properly give us like amazing performances like other people did in the past. And I do still think that the guy is overrated for his career. And yeah, he's having a great, return to Formula One in the last year or so, but I still think that is the case. But guys, I've been live for what, just over an hour? And I think that I'm going to bring the stream to a close. Thank you guys so much for coming along. Quick reminder again of the schedule. I'll be live in 2 days' time on Friday for qualifying. Remember, Friday is qualifying day. The race day is on Saturday due to Ramadan. So I'll be live at 3:30 p.m. UK time, an hour and a half that is before qualifying on Friday for the qualifying watch along, and then live on Saturday, 2.5 hours before the race for the 2024 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix at 2:30 p.m. UK time. Make sure to come along for that. And again, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Let me just finish up the poll in the chat where I've asked you guys who is most likely to challenge Red Bull at this weekend's Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia. 76 votes, and Ferrari have won it with 73% of the vote. Mercedes, 13% of the vote in second. McLaren, third, 11% of the vote, and Aston Martin, deservedly, in fourth on 1% of the vote. But yeah, thank you guys for coming along. Been great to have you along. Again, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for that content coming up. If you haven't already, smash the like button before I go. And as well, make sure to check out some of my latest content on the channel. I think there is a video linked in the description, a Lance Stroll video I did about, 3 months ago now. And as well, a link in the chat and in the description or my Discord server. If you want to join that, it'd be great if you could do so. That's a great place, that Discord, for notifications for my videos, when I go live, and channel updates in general. So thank you guys, obviously, for coming along. And until, guys, my qualifying watch along at 3:30 p.m. UK time on Friday, it's been me, Kazza HD. Goodbye.